Load balancing isn't something that's new to Windows. In fact, it's been around for a while. But Terminal Services also supports load balancing via the TS Session Broker role service. Now up front, I will make clear the point though that if you only have one terminal server, then there's no point installing the Session Broker role service, as you need a minimum of 2 servers to take advantage of load balancing. So what is load balancing? Well, for those of you that don't know, load balancing is simply the process of distributing the load of a server across 2 or more servers. So let's just say that we've got our terminal server here. There's our terminal server. We'll call it TS1, the server we've been using here for a while. And this server has an IP address of 10.32.0.65, if I'm not mistaken. So we've got our terminal server here, and we've got a whole bunch of users. There's 3,000 users, we'll say, connecting to this server. So since we've got such amount of users connecting to this server, and obviously there's going to be quite a load on this server, it's clear to us we're going to need more horsepower. People are complaining things are getting too slow. Well, one option we have is to then create a second terminal server and load balance this server. We'll call this one TS2. Let's just give it an IP, a different IP there. So we've got a second terminal server. We load balance it so that it appears to our users at least that we still only have one single server. But in reality, we're going to have 2 or more servers instead, and we'll get our users to connect to a sort of a virtual host, if you like, which is going to distribute that load of those connections amongst our 2 machines equally. So in order for this to work, a couple of things need to happen. So rather than getting our users to point straight to TS1 as they're doing right now, and incidentally this is how our lab has been set up right now with a single terminal server, we're going to create this new terminal server here, TS2, and instead of getting our users to connect directly to either of these 2 machines, instead we could use DNS round robin or network load balancing to handle the initial connection to our terminal server. Now, to make this video a little easier to understand and a little easier to configure, I'm going to use DNS round robin to set this up, and we'll work with the TS Session Broker in this video using DNS round robin. And if you are looking for a more robust load balancing solution later on, you could move into NLB or network load balancing, or even deploy a hardware load balancing solution in its place. So in our DNS console, we're going to go and create a new virtual host. We're going to call it farm, since that's what Terminal Services calls a grouping of 2 or more servers, a farm. Although the name really isn't all that important. You can call it whatever you like. And instead, I'm going to have this farm point to these 2 terminal servers. So as far as our DNS is concerned, the server that has the host name of farm will really just be pointing to TS1 and TS2. As far as our users are concerned though, this server farm, this server called farm, is a real terminal server, but they'll never know that it is in fact really just connecting behind the scenes to these 2 real machines. And that's the beauty of load balancing. To our users, we've just got one machine name to remember, one machine to connect to, this server called farm. Behind the scenes though, we could have 2 or 20 terminal servers actually picking up those connections. The users really don't care either. All they care about is, are my applications available and is the performance acceptable? So before we move over to our servers and we start the actual configuration, I just want to run over what steps we'll need to follow in order to successfully deploy and configure our TS Session Broker load balancing. So the first step that we'll need to do is to obviously install the TS Session Broker role service. We'll just abbreviate that as TSSB role service on pretty much any server in our domain, as long as it's both a domain member, so it needs to be a member of the domain, and it needs to also be running Windows 2008 server. Now the next step would be for every terminal server that we want to participate in our load balancing farm, we're going to need to add those servers' Active Directory computer accounts to a new local group, which is simply called the Session Directory, excuse my writing there, computers group. Now this group is going to exist on the server that's holding the Session Broker role. So when we install the TS Session Broker role, this new local group will be created on that server, and then we just need to take the computer accounts from our terminal servers and add them to this local group. Now, if that's confusing, that's okay. We'll see how we can do that later in this video. Now, the next step would be we also need to take each terminal server that needs to join this farm and actually join them to the farm so that they can participate in load balancing. So let's just say they need to join the farm. And there's a couple of ways we can do that. We can do that manually, and we can do it using group policy. So we'll show you both ways. And finally, our last step would be to configure DNS round robin. So that way DNS knows about our terminal servers. In fact, of all these steps here, we've got 4 steps. We've got 1 to install, 2 to do the computer accounts, 3 to join the farm, and 4 DNS round robin. So of these 4 steps, I'm actually going to do the last one first, because step 1 we've already done. We installed the TS Session Broker role service in our first video when we installed terminal services. All right, so we've got 3 things to do. Let's get started. So I've just switched over to my domain controller here so we can go and set up the DNS side of things first. So we're going to click Start. We're going to go to Administrative Tools, and we'll fire up our DNS console. Now we'll need to expand our server, in my case DC01. We'll expand our forward lookup zones. Then we'll expand our domain, or select our domain, jawkes.com. And in here, you'll see that I've already got 2 server records, 2 host records, pointing to my terminal servers, TS1 and TS2. So TS1 has the IP address of 10.32.065 and 0.66 for TS2. So we're going to need to create a new host record for our farm. So we're going to right click here on any blank area of the window. We're going to choose a new host, or a record. Now we'll need to enter in the name of the server that we want our users to connect to. So I'm just going to call this farm, and that's going to change our fully qualified domain name here to farm.jawkes.com. And that's going to be the host name that our users will type into their RDP client or to their web browser so they can access terminal services. All right, now we'll need to point this name to one of our terminal servers. So let's just point it to our first one first, which is our TS1 server that has the IP of 10.32.065. Let's click Add Host. All right, now the good thing is with this DNS window is it does stay open, so we can add in another record. Now I'm going to call this one Farm as well, the same name, and we're going to enter in the IP address for our second terminal server TS2, which of course is 10.32.066. We'll click Add Host. All right, and now we'll click Done. All right, now that this is set up, we can move over to our terminal server itself, where we can continue on with the remainder of our configuration. So I've just switched over to our terminal server here. I've switched over to our terminal server TS1 because this is the terminal server that has the TS Session Broker role service installed. So let's go and open up Server Manager. We're going to expand roles. We'll expand terminal services. And we'll select Terminal Services Configuration. Now, in the middle of this console, right down the bottom here, you'll note that it tells us that this server is currently not a member of a farm. So we're going to need to double click here. That's going to open up a new window right at the TS Session Broker tab. Now, obviously, since we're not part of a farm right now, we'll need to check this box first to join a farm using the TS Session Broker. And that'll open up the rest of this window, where firstly we'll need to enter in the name of the server that's hosting our TS Session Broker role. Well, that's this server, TS1. We'll need to then enter in the name of the farm, which of course I simply called Farm. All right, now, is this server going to participate in load balancing? Of course it is. We'll check the box so it does. We can also set a weighting for each of our servers in the farm. And in most cases, you'll leave this value the same for all members in a farm. But when you do have mismatched servers, for example, you might have one terminal server that's running a single CPU and 8 gigs of RAM, and you might have a second machine that's got dual quad-core CPUs and 32 gigs of RAM. Well, in that case, the second machine would be able to handle more connections, and you might want to give it a higher weighting so that way it receives more connections in total. But for us, the defaults are fine. Now, would we like to use IP address redirection to enable reconnecting to existing connections. Yes, we most likely will want to do that, because if we don't, potentially we can run into the issue where a user might be disconnected from one of their terminal services sessions, and then when they reconnect, they start a new session, and that can leave all of those open sessions hanging around. So we're going to check this box, or leave it checked, and have users be able to reconnect to their existing sessions. Now finally, at the bottom here, we'll need to check a box to which IP address on this terminal server we'll use for reconnection. Obviously, I've only got one anyway, so we'll check that box. We'll click OK. Now the next step in our configuration process will be to set up the exact same configuration settings for our other terminal servers that want to be part of this farm. So I'm going to switch over to TS2, where we'll need to do the exact same thing. All right, well, we've just switched over to our second terminal server, TS2, so let's go and do the same thing. We're going to fire up the server manager. We're going to expand roles, terminal services, and select terminal services configuration. Now down the bottom again, you can see that this machine obviously isn't a member of a farm like TS1 wasn't, so we'll double click here, and that'll open up a new window right here at our TS Session Broker tab. So firstly, we'll need to check this box to join a farm. We'll need to then enter in the name of the server that's hosting our TS Session Broker, which is TS1. We'll need to enter in the name of our farm, which I called farm. We'll check the box to participate in load balancing. And all the rest are the same. Down the bottom here, we'll need to select which IP address on the terminal server we'll use for reconnection. Again, I've only got one, so that box will be checked, and we'll click OK. Now, although I just configured two separate machines there, we could also use group policy to set this up for us if we'd prefer to do that. So I've quickly just switched over to my domain controller here to show you how you can use group policy. So we are going to click on Start, Administrative Tools, Group Policy Management. We'll expand our forest, domains, our domain, right click on our default domain policy and choose Edit. Now under our computer configuration heading here on the left, we're going to expand policies, expand administrative templates, expand Windows components, terminal services, terminal server, and then we'll select the TS Session Broker. Now over here on the right hand side of our console, we've got a few policies that we can configure to set up our load balancing. Now the first policy here enables us to join a farm. The next policy is where we can configure the farm's name. Now we could use IP address redirection, the TS Session Broker server name, and whether or not we'll use load balancing. Or in other words, basically all of the settings that we just configured manually, we'd be able to set here using group policy. So once you've done this, the last thing we'd want to do to finalize all of this is to add the computer accounts for each of our terminal servers that need to participate in load balancing to the Session Broker's computer group on our Session Broker server. Alright, well, I've just switched back to our terminal server TS1, which of course is hosting the TS Session Broker role. And in our server manager console here, down the bottom, we're going to expand configuration. We'll expand local users and groups, and we'll select groups. Now, in the middle of our console here, you'll note that we've got this new group here called Session Directory Computers. Now, it's inside this group that we'll need to add all of the computer accounts for each of our terminal servers that are members of our farm. So let's double click this. We'll choose the Add button, and then we'll need to click the Object Types button and tell it to search for the computers as well. We'll click OK. Now we'll type in the names of the terminal servers that we want to add. So I'm going to type in TS and I'll click Check Names. And it's found both of my servers here, so I'll select both of them. We'll click OK. We'll click OK. And now if we click OK once more, then it's done. But an alternative option, if you've got a lot of terminal servers that you want to be adding and removing on a regular basis, would be to create a group of these terminal servers inside Active Directory and then add that group here, because that'll make working with this easier, because then you'll just be able to add and remove members to the group in Active Directory rather than having to log in and do it on this local machine. So let's do that. Now I've just switched to my domain controller here, and let's go to Active Directory Users and Computers. And I'm going to right click here and create a new group. I'll call this group TS Farm. You can call it whatever you like, of course. We'll click OK. Now let's double click on this group and go to the Members tab. We'll click Add. Now we'll need to choose the Object Types button and select Computers. We'll click OK. Now, like before, I'm going to type in the name of my terminal servers that we want to add. I'll type TS, click Check Names. It's found them both. Let's select them both. Click OK, OK, and OK once more. All right, now for the last time, I've just switched back over to my terminal server, TS1, and I'm going to remove both of these servers from the list, and let's click Add again. Now this time, by the way, because we're only looking to search for a group and not a computer, we don't need to go in here and click Object Types and add in computers. We don't need to do that anymore. Let's just type in TS. We'll click Check Names. It's found our TS Farm group. We'll click OK, and we'll click OK once more. And done. That's it. So obviously either of these two methods are going to work. You can add in the accounts manually or do it via Active Directory, but the Active Directory group method is obviously a much cleaner solution. So the final step in any product rollout has to be testing. So I've logged on to our Windows 7 machine in our lab here. I'm going to open up a copy of Internet Explorer, and you'll note that normally I would be going to TS1 or TS2. Under normal circumstances, that would be what I'd be doing. But this time I'm going to change this and connect to our farm/TS. Let's hit enter here and see what happens. All right, well, if everything's working as intended, I should see web access open up and I'll be connected to one of these two servers. Now, I don't know what server I got. I don't care what server I've got. It makes not a single scrap of difference to me as a regular user. As long as my applications are there, as long as I've got access, to be honest, I couldn't care less which server is dishing out these applications. So there we have it. Web access loads up, and now we're cooking, ready to fire up our apps. So in this video, we've talked about the TS Session Broker role service. The great part of all of this is that in a very short space of time, we've managed to take two terminal servers that were totally separate and have them share the load of all of our incoming connections. Now that means that we can offer our users a much better level of performance by spreading out those connections amongst two or more servers. Now, if you take the time and take a look into things like network load balancing or even a hardware-based solution, then this will only be better and more robust. So we hope you've enjoyed this video, and we'd like to thank you for watching.